Comment briefly on what we learned about the Lehman Brothers Repo 105 scam, because I think it relates to this to some degree. If you recall, viewers, when it came time to report at the end of the quarter, they simply took billions of dollars of debt and they parked it at another bank for a couple of days.
Yep.
Then when the regulators left to go to some other bank, they put it back on their balance sheet. Now, aren't all banks doing this to one degree or another? And isn't that the primary purpose of the global derivative/shadow banking industry, to hide accountability and to hide liability?
Yeah, and to hide losses. It's called window dressing. It happens in different ways on different quarters throughout different banks. And the worse they are doing, the more they require the window dressing. So the worse the position is, the more risk it incurs for the bank, for other banks, for all of the population that deals with these institutions and has no recourse and no Fed to bail them out. The window dressing gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more that the loss increases.
Okay, so now the group of investors out there who know really what's going on to the hedge funds. The hedge funds have huge access to capital as well. Hedge funds are some of the best customers of banks like JP Morgan because they open up these credit lines to them. And that gives them the ability to make these huge bets. Now, what would it take to get a hedge fund to break ranks and say, you know what, I'm going to be the winner in this prisoner's dilemma. I'm going to be the winner of this game theory John Nashian moment. And I'm going to attack JP Morgan stock viciously with naked short sales, everything I've got, because I'm going to make a bundle.
John Nash was one of the most brilliant minds of his generation.
Welcome to Princeton. Who among you will be the next Einstein?
Find a truly original idea. And it's the only way I will ever distinguish myself. It's the only way I will ever matter.
He saw the world.
Where's Nash?
Out there, looking for his original idea.
In ways that no one could imagine.
This flies in the face of 150 years of theory.
Congratulations, John.
It's the achievement of a lifetime.
I'm wondering, Professor Nash, if I can ask you to dinner. You do eat, don't you? How big is the universe?
Infinite.
How do you know for sure?
I don't, I just believe it.
It's the same with love, I guess.
And isn't there a risk of one of these hedge funds going rogue and effectively falling out of favor with the club, as it were? And I mean, isn't that a genuine threat?
It's a genuine threat. Look at what Paulson did with the hedge fund Paulson when he basically bet against long positions in the subprime market. He shorted the heck out of them. And there's no reason why another hedge fund can't do the same thing with the corporate credit positions, the synthetic positions that JP Morgan has on. It's like it's needled in, they can see. The thing that would prevent that would be if they have an attachment to JP Morgan through getting credit from JP Morgan, which, as you mentioned, these banks provide because they have all this cheap money. They provide it to all their customers, and the whole thing morphs into this huge snowball of derivatives that keeps going down and down and down.
But it does break down. It broke down at Lehman Brothers. Mm-hmm. It broke down at Bear Stearns,
yes.
Where essentially the hedge funds, the bank, JP Morgan, I think was one of the biggest beneficiaries of attacking Bear Stearns
yes.
with short sales.
Yes.
They acquire those assets for pennies on the dollar, and we see this kind of using financial instruments as weapons.
Yeah.
Now so my question is, JP Morgan have used them, weapons to acquire assets on the cheap, and Goldman's used them in Greece to acquire Greek assets on the cheap. I'm just saying, isn't there somebody out there with the cojones to take on JP Morgan? Why can't they attack Morgan and take that stock down to zero?
It could be a desk at Citibank. There could be an institution or a group that says, we're going to make a quick buck against not just JP Morgan stock, which has been down 10% after the announcement of this $2 billion and counting loss, and whatever else lurks behind that, but against the very position, which will make the unwinding of that position just create a bigger loss for JP Morgan, and the whole thing goes down and down, confidence erodes, etc. It could be a bank, it could be a hedge fund, and it could happen. It's very plausible.
Well, we can hope, can't we? There's so much fraud in all of this, and Jamie Dimon, he made no mention of these problems in his quarterly shareholder conference. Obviously, he omitted some key information, which is a crime through omission. The options market was quite active on that news. Obviously, some insider trading going on as well. They've been buying back their own stock. So talk a little bit about that phase of this multifaceted fraud.
Yeah, well, in April, there was a announcement, or people knew about the fact that there was this position that was growing, and there was a Wall Street Journal article on it. You know, people talked about it, and that kind of festered. And Jamie Dimon was like, well, it's under control. You know, this is a guy that the business press considers to be this champion, golden wonder boy of Wall Street. He's had it under control. He'll have it under control. And that's what he goes in with. Even now that this $2 billion has come out as a loss, his whole MO is, yeah, it's a mistake, it's egregious, but, you know, I got it. You know, we're going to cut it and move on. And it doesn't work that way in an integrated, unregulated, derivatives-heavy financial market.
Well, let's talk about the global banking community for a second, because some of the banks in other countries are not happy with what's going on. In Canada, for example, as it relates to this global move by the Bank of International Settlements to raise, you know, quality capital, tier 1 capital, Jamie Dimon was actually hectoring the head of the Bank of Canada about why he shouldn't be so forceful in attempting to raise capital requirements for banks. Like, here's a sovereign. It's Canada. It's not Jamie's client. You know, maybe it's a client, but I mean, it's not Jamie's country. Jamie's not Canadian. Where does he get off going into Canada and lecturing their government on, you know, how to commit fraud like he does?
Capnat spellbound Michael. I have used my influence with the High Council to attain an assignment for you.
I will not fail.
Since I am your co-janitor-in-law, this missive might be seen as a family favor. So listen carefully, and I implore you, do not scrap nor this one. You are to be made fuel survey underlord of a wilderness planet at the end of the Nartulium solar chain.
A humocarb planet. I shall rule it. I understand. I will not fail.
You will be given an armed E-grade star cruiser. You will vanquish the planet, enslave its population, and await further instruction.
Enslave, then wait. I understand. I will not fail.
Well, then, Jamie Dimon has been enabled by an entire infrastructure of politicians, of a Fed, of a Treasury Department, of an SEC, to grow this like humongous egotistical head about how banks should operate because he's so great at it, ignoring all of the help he got, ignoring the fact that, you know, you mentioned Bear Stearns before. In that takeover that JP Morgan did of Bear Stearns, they're still guaranteed to $29 billion worth of money in case those positions fail by the Federal Reserve. We're still on the hook for their takeover of Bear Stearns. So he's been enabled to do all this. And when you enable, like, you know, a truculent bully in the neighborhood to keep doing what he's doing, and you say, don't worry about it, here's some more capital, you know, here's someone else's lunch, you just keep doing it. And he's just showing that he continues to have that arrogance and the large institution behind him to keep doing it.
So to use the bully analogy, he's stealing milk money from the kids at school, and he's doing so with the permission of the principal, who not only gives him permission, but guarantees that if he doesn't get the full extent of the milk money he's trying to steal, that they're going to reimburse him for that amount for a certain period of time.
Yeah, basically that's what's going on. And it's against a history where even that bank has never been as egregious as what he is doing, has never had as much capital to float on, as many favors. And Jamie Dimon was voted in twice to be a Class A New York Federal Reserve director. He's in there a second time. You know, he's at the top of this game he's involved in, and that has created what is potentially what is a bad situation, JP Morgan, because it is connected so much to the rest of the banking community, the best of the financial markets, and to us who have to deal with these institutions when we deposit money, take out checks, use credit cards, or whatever else.
let's talk about London for a second, because London is really the nexus of the global fraud, isn't it? They had the AIG went through there, MF Global went through, Lehman Brothers, Madoff, they all went through London. You were in London. You were at Bear Stearns for a time, so you know what's going on there quite well. What is it about London, that the regulatory framework, what's actually going on there where it becomes the clearinghouse effectively for global financial fraud?
London's had a history of being that clearinghouse since before the First World War. When U.S. banks have wanted to circumvent any regulation that has happened from before that to Glass-Steagall in 1933 and so forth, they find a place in London, they open it, that's where they lend from, that's what they've done, and other institutions have done that as well. And what's happened is London has never kept up with or had the wherewithal or the desire or whatever to keep up with the sheer volume of transactions that go through. And banks always take advantage of the weakest place to do the most business.
Naomi Prince, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Naomi Prince. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.